Welcome back to the Mega Man X Retrospective. Today we're going to be looking at the first two sequels to the original Mega Man X, Mega Man X2 and X3. X2 is a direct sequel to one of the best games ever made. Those are very big shoes for any game to fill. It was released just 1 year after its predecessor in 1994 on the Super Nintendo, and has never managed to achieve the same legacy. But it's still considered a great game. I first played it on the X Collection on the GameCube in 2012. Even though I played X1 all the time back then, it actually took me like a full year to play this game, for whatever reason. And I enjoyed it, but it didn't really stick out to me, so I didn't revisit it much. However, when I was 17 and really got into the rest of the series, I came back to X2 and loved it. I actually thought it was better than X1, and it used to be my second favorite game in the series. But I haven't played it much since then, so what are my thoughts now? The plot is Sigma's Mavericks are still causing havoc even after his death. X and the other Maverick Hunter, oh no. X invades an old Reploid factory to finally stop the resistance. But in the shadows, a group of Mavericks called the X Hunters have teamed up to beat him by sending their followers after him, while they rebuild his dead friend Zero in the hopes of using him against X. Pretty soon, they contact X to fight them directly in the hopes of getting Zero's parts back. After beating them, X finds out they were working for a returning Sigma and goes to confront him. X discovers that Sigma's either rebuilt Zero or has built a fake Zero. Either way, X gets Zero back and defeats Sigma again. Sigma hints that Zero was supposed to be a Maverick and was the last of the Doctor's creations. What Doctor? Wait, oh my god. It all makes sense now. X was created by Dr. Light, so that must mean Zero. Zero was created by Dr. Mario! Well done, Capcom. X wonders what he'll have to sacrifice to achieve Dr. Light's dream of peace between Reploids and humans, and the game ends. There's not much to say about this story. Obviously it's a platformer from 1994, but X1's plot was definitely more impactful since it was about X improving throughout the game. He still gets stronger in this game, but it's not really part of the story since everyone knows how capable X is from the start. There are some minor things I like, such as seeing Dr. Kane, because we almost never see humans in this series, or the Japanese version hinting that Surgis is a robotic copy of Dr. Wily, the villain from the classic series. From a graphical standpoint, X2 is a clear improvement over its predecessor. The backgrounds are more detailed, and there are a lot more visual effects. Like in Wire Sponge's stage, with the sunny weather and rain, or the multiple uses of the CX4 chip. This chip lets NES games render 3D polygons, and it definitely does look impressive for the time. Albeit a little out of place against everything else on the screen being 2D. You can tell the developers were proud of this chip, because the title screen and the final boss both use it. When I think about this game, I always remember that it's the X game with all the wireframes. The soundtrack is also very good. Not as good as X1 in my opinion, but there are some real bangers here. By far my favorite song in the game is the theme for X Hunter Stage 1 and 2. It's phenomenal. The gameplay is very similar to X1. You can still jump, shoot, charge your buster, and wall jump. Except this time the dash is available at the start, which is really nice, and it's a feature every following X game has too. The ride armor from X1 returns, except it's a bit different in that I can hover now. Another vehicle has also been added. The Ride Chaser, which is a bike you can ride on, while dashing and shooting at enemies in Overdrive Ostrich's level. Other than that, I would say the main changes have been to X's abilities. You can still get 4 Dr. Light armor parts that are a bit different from before. The foot parts now give you the air dash, which allows you to dash during a regular jump, which is a very helpful upgrade that feels like a natural progression from the dash in X1. The buster part is amazing in this game. It once again lets you charge up special weapons, but more importantly, it powers up the full charge shot, so you can fire 2 of them in a row. As a trade-off, you can't move until X is done firing, but man, this is so satisfying to hit bosses with. It does very good damage and is a vast improvement over the upgrade in X1 that was usually better if you didn't fully charge it. The body parts once again have the damage you take, which is great, and it also gives you a screen nuke attack that I never really use. And then the head parts find secret pathways, which is also not very practical in my experience. But still, I love the armor upgrades in this game. The second armor is easily one of the best in the series. The special weapons are good in this game too. At first I thought they were kinda bad, but it's more so that they're a bit slower and not as practical as in X1. But they definitely have their uses, like Overdrive Ostrich's weapon that shoots vertically up when fully charged, and killed this enemy that was trying to crush me. Crystal Snail's weapon that freezes enemies and lets you platform off them, or my personal favorite, Bubble Crab's weapon, that does good damage and one-shots enemies in this grind spot. And like X1, they help a lot in getting certain other upgrades. The structure of this game is almost the same as X1. Once again, there's an intro stage, 8 Mavericks to fight in any order you want, whose special weapons beat each other in a weakness chain, heart tanks, sub-tanks, and armor parts to collect, and some final levels. But when you're exploring the stages, you may find doors that you can't open, but are clearly important. And that's where we get to the main gimmick of the game, the X-Hunters. After you beat 2 Mavericks, the 3 X-Hunters make their presence known, and will show up in some of the Maverick stages to fight X behind these doors. Beating each of them gives you a part of Zero. It's kind of morbid that the villains are just walking around with Zero's body parts in this game, isn't it? If you beat all of them before the 8 Mavericks are defeated, the final boss has one less phase, because Zero has been rebuilt by you, and insta-kills the fake Zero. I think this is a good feature, especially because it encourages exploration, and even adds some strategy to the game, in when you want to fight the X-Hunters. If you game over or re-enter a stage you've already beaten and exit out of it, the X-Hunters will be shuffled around to new locations. I did this before Overdrive Ostrich's level, because I did not want to fight Surges and the Maverick in one go with only one sub-tank. Every game after X1 tries to innovate the formula, for better or worse, and I think this is one of the best attempts at that. The stages in this game are solid. They're fun to explore and have some great platforming. Like in Flame Stag's level, where you have to wall jump fast to beat the rising lava, or keeping the Ride Chaser from blowing up in Overdrive Ostrich's level to get the heart tank. And like X1, it feels rewarding to upgrade X in these places. So far this game sounds great and like a real improvement on X1. So you may be asking, do I still think this game is superior? And the answer is no. This game is solid, but I realize I have some minor issues with it during my playthrough. Like I praised the X-Hunters mechanic before, but if you miss one of them in the level they're in, you will never see that specific hunter again, and you won't be able to reunite Zero as a result. The game does not tell you this. It does unlock you have a good ending or anything, but that's not cool. And as good as the levels are, they're just not as fun as the ones in X1 in my opinion. I think part of it might be the upgraded charge shot stopping your momentum when you fire it, which slows down the fast pacing just enough that you feel it. I also think the end bosses are a bit too non-interactive or easy in this game. Like I'm barely moving, and so all of them are pushovers when X has the body armor and 4 sub-tanks, which are overkill in this game in my opinion. I think the problem is the bosses don't move around enough. I forgot to mention this in my X1 review, that you cannot use a password or save to return to a specific final level. If you make it to Sigma, and shut off the game to come back to it later, you gotta go through the whole fortress and refill your sub-tanks all over again. X2 has the same problem, which I don't like. Finally, the Mavericks once again get stunlocked by their weaknesses, which is a mechanic that makes the game less interesting, but at least you can have some fun boss fights if you take them down with the X-Buster like I do. These are all minor criticisms, and what is overall a worthy sequel, but I hope you can understand why I prefer X1 now. Remember, that game was virtually perfect. Conversely, one of the biggest things X2 has over X1 is the routing. Now I like playing these games in an order where I can get the best upgrades first, minimize backtracking, and still grab all the items. X2 is one of the only games in the series where you can completely eliminate backtracking if you know certain tricks, which is just fantastic. My order through the game starts with Wire Sponge for his heart and sub-tank. By the way, this is a great grind spot for the sub-tank right before the boss. Now that's good game design. I then tackle Wheel Gator, who stays not only has the best grind spot in the game against these respawning birds, but also has the amazing X-Buster upgrade. You're supposed to air dash to get it, but Wire Sponge's weapon latches onto walls and can actually get you up there with some fast wall jumps. It's very tricky to pull off. It took me 7 minutes to do it this playthrough, but the trick is as soon as you latch onto the wall, just mash the jump button and eventually you'll get up there. Wheel Gator is usually one of the worst Mavericks in the series because of how slow and boring his boss fight is, with him camping in oil for most of it. But this playthrough he barely did that for some reason, so I can't complain too much. This is the only time in my life I actually had fun fighting him. I then do Overdrive Ostrich to grab the air dash, and then I take on Bubble Crab and Flame Stag to get the second and third sub-tanks. You can get the sub-tank in the former stage early by doing this very precise jump off the ground and then jumping on top of the water. A little cryptic, but this is not the intended method, so I actually can't complain. I also fought Surges and Violin in these stages because I wanted at least 2 sub-tanks before facing them. Crystal Snail is next, and his stage has this weird floating ride armor that can hover but usually falls short of grabbing the sub-tank, unless you know that you can hover for a bit longer by repeatedly tapping jump instead of holding it down. I wish the game communicated that better. I then end with Morph Moth and Magnus Centipede. The former stage nets you the damage reduction part that basically frees up the rest of the game, and in the latter level, I easily beat Agile. And that's my routing through the game. I love how you don't have to backtrack, and I wish other games in the series were like this. I really enjoy the final stages in this game. There's a lot of great platforming here, and applications of your special weapons. I just wish the bosses were a bit better designed. Like X1, there's a secret upgrade, this time in the third X-Hunter stage. You have to get through this tricky platforming section that ends with you combining the charged speed burner weapon and air dash over spikes. Thankfully there's always an extra life here, so you'll never game over. But if you get through this section with full HP and have all special weapons, heart tanks, sub-tanks, and armor parts, you'll get the Shoryuken from Street Fighter that cooks bosses. I think it's easier to use than the Hadouken from X1. It allowed me to breeze through the dull boss rush. That is just a single stage in this game and every following X game. Sigma is actually pretty easy in this game. I remember thinking this even on my first playthrough. This run I beat him only using the X-Buster, and it still only cost me one sub-tank. For some reason he spawns enemies in the last phase that can drop health pickups, so you can actually out-heal him during the final boss. The fight would have been harder if I didn't get all of Zero's parts, but really not by much. Definitely one of the easiest final battles in the series. And that's Mega Man X2. I really like this game. X1 is a masterpiece, but there are many things in X2 that I think are actually superior, and it keeps the same core gameplay I love. And that's really all you can ask for in a sequel. I have some small complaints, but this is still an awesome game. Can I say it's art though? Not really. It's close, but I can't say it's a nearly flawless experience. But I would still highly recommend this game, and it's one of the best in the series. And now on to X3. Released in 1996 on the Super Nintendo, with ports on the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, Capcom did not design most of the game this time. That was done by Minakuchi Engineering, the company that made the Mega Man games on the original Game Boy. This is the X game I have the least experience with. I remember playing it after X2, and I could not get past the third Maverick stage for the life of me. I beat X2 in one day, but this game was just too hard. The first time I beat it was actually not on the X collection, but was when I emulated it on the Wii Homebrew channel because I needed save states to have a chance. I then replayed it at the end of high school as part of my Mega Man X binge, and replayed it a couple months later when the X Legacy collection first came out. And I liked it then, but it never stood out much to me, and that was the last time I played the game. It's been 6 years, so let's see what my opinion of it is now. The story is a Reploid named Dr. Doppler, nice physics reference by the way, cures all Reploids of going Maverick for a few months, only to go Maverick himself along with the Reploids that he just cured. X fights these Mavericks, and Dr. Doppler, where we learn that Sigma's true form is that of a computer virus, and he's corrupted Doppler. Sigma then returns in a new body and is defeated by X. He tries to possess X, but is foiled by Doppler or Zero depending on the ending. X wonders when peace between humanity and Reploids will be achieved, and we're told he'll have to fight Zero, which kinda comes out of nowhere in the ending without Zero. Yeah, the story here is really paper thin, but it's a Mega Man game, so it's fine. It is kinda neat knowing Sigma's a computer virus, that's why he's able to come back every game. But how's the gameplay this time around? Well, it's largely the same as X2. Can you see why I combined these games? The main difference is supposed to be Zero. You can call him up during stages to play as him. He has a lot more health than X when you start out, and he even has a melee attack, as his final stage of the charge shot, called the Z-Saber. Sounds pretty cool, right? A new playable character is a massive innovation. The problem is Zero can't collect items or fight bosses. Every time you get to a mini-boss or boss door, X comes back, and Zero can't be called again, even after the boss is beaten. I guess you can say they were trying to balance the mechanic, but as a result, there's almost no reason to use Zero. And God forbid you die with him. If Zero dies just one time, he's damaged for the rest of the game and can't be summoned ever again. It's like if you miss an X-Hunter in X2, but it matters a lot more. You see, in the second Doppler stage, there's a mini-boss that is the only one in the game you can fight with Zero. If you beat him, Zero gets damaged when the boss explodes, and gives X his Z-Saber for the rest of the game. And the Z-Saber is awesome. It's even better than the Hadouken or Shoryuken, since you can use it independently of your HP, it doesn't require special input, and it takes out half a boss's health bar. But if you died with Zero, you can never get this, which sucks, because the game doesn't tell you about this super strict policy. Zero died in my playthrough, and I forgot about this really dumb mechanic. I was almost gonna restart the whole game until I remembered I can just find a password online that keeps all my collectibles and makes it so Zero didn't die. But I shouldn't have had to do that. Just don't use Zero in this game, trust me. The armor parts are back for X and they're weird. The foot parts are awesome. Once again you get the air dash, but now it can dash upwards instead of just left and right. There's a lot more vertical platforming in this game, so this really comes in handy. It's definitely better than the X2 air dash, which was already good. But then there's the Buster upgrade. I don't like it. You can fire 2 charge shots like in X2, but this time you can do them at once, which covers a lot more vertical area. That's the kind of thing that sounds a lot more useful on paper than it is in execution. You think the blast in the center will be stronger than the regular charge shot, but you'd be wrong. It's the same damage, except it puts you in lag after using it. The same thing happened with the upgraded shot in X2, except there it made sense, because the blast actually did more damage. It also slows down the game's frame rate when you use it. I actively try not to use this, to be honest. It really does feel like a nerf, which is crazy. How is X2 the only game with the Buster part that feels like an upgrade? I would recommend picking this up at the end, but the problem is the part still lets you charge up special weapons, so you need it early for that. Not because the charged special weapons are very useful, but because you need them to get the other armor parts and other collectibles. In X2, you could get all the armor parts independently of each other, but not in this game. If you want the body part, you need the foot parts from Blizzard Buffalo's level, and Tunnel Rhino's weapon to get the Buster part from Neon Tiger's stage. Then you need Gravity Beetle's weapon, and now, on your 5th Maverick stage, you can finally get the body armor part. Jeez man, the item game is really limited this time around. The body armor part once again cuts damage in half, but this time after you get hit, a shield is created that cuts damage down by 62%. Trust me, that's a godsend in this game, but we'll cover that in a bit. The head parts are easily the best version so far. They show a map at the start of the stage that marks items you haven't grabbed yet. It's a bit vague, but it did help me find everything in the end. However, the best thing it does is it tells you what items you're missing from every Maverick stage, which is extremely helpful. I wish every game had this, it's fantastic. So the third armor is definitely good, except for the arm parts, which are the most important. How do they fix the head parts but screw this up? I just don't get it. I don't really like the special weapons in this game. Most of them are a bit too slow and weak for my liking, especially because the enemies are really durable this time around. Some weapons are good like the Frost Shield, that always makes enemies drop health when they get hit by it. This is a game changer for grinding sub-tanks. Easily the best weapon in the game is the Spinning Blade from Crust Crawfish that destroys even the bulkiest of enemies. This one is extremely useful, especially because of how tough this game is. Wanna know what Maverick I did last? I mainly just used the X-Buster because I didn't like most of the special weapons. Instead of the X-Hunters gimmick, this time Doppler sends these guys bit and bite after you in 2 of the Maverick stages. And these 2 aren't optional, you're required to fight them. You can also fight a returning Vial from X1 in these secret transporters for a 2-phase boss battle. You then rematch these guys in the first 2 Doppler stages at the end of the game. But if you beat them with their weaknesses the first time around, they'll be destroyed, and you'll fight some different bosses at the end of those stages. The second Doppler stage even has different level design, depending on if Vial was destroyed or not. I think this is a neat feature that adds a little variety to the game. Side note, when I was a kid, I could not beat Bit for the life of me. That's when I started emulating this game to have a chance. The other change to the game structure is there are some new collectibles this time around. Well, kind of. You can now get 4 different ride armors that you can change into at these stations. This is an idea that had a lot of potential, but it's really underutilized by weird design choices. If you grab, say, the Frog armor first, you can't use it until you free the Chimera armor in Blast Hornet stage, which is another arbitrary limit on the item game. And these armors just aren't that useful because the stages are designed around regular X. The only time I ever used the Frog armor was to grab the Kangaroo armor, which I basically never used. What is this, a pyramid scheme? The main purpose of the ride armors are just to grab the other items. There are also enhancement chips you can collect that have an interesting mechanic. There are 4 of them, and you can only equip 1 of them at a time. So there's an element of strategy in which one to go with. Or, you can grab every collectible in the game except the enhancement chips, have full HP, and slide into this wall to get the gold armor from Dr. Light that gives you all 4 enhancement chip abilities. Oops. I don't even find these that helpful besides the enhanced body armor. Like, one of them lets you heal if you stand in place, which is nice, but I already have 4 sub-tanks, so I don't really need that. These new collectibles are really undercooked and ultimately feel pointless. The main thing I remember about X3 is the difficulty. This game is very tough. Enemies have a lot more health and are much more aggressive than before. The weaker special weapons and mediocre charge shot also stack the deck against you. And then X himself is made of paper in this game. You take so much damage from attacks, especially against the bosses. Like I did Toxic Seahorse 4th, and it took all 3 of my sub-tanks to beat him. This is easily the hardest game to fight the Mavericks using only the X-Buster. I got a ton of game overs this playthrough. It doesn't help that extra lives are kinda rare this time around. It's also kinda hard to grind for sub-tank refills because of how aggressive enemies are. This screen on Toxic Seahorse's level became my go-to method because it's safe, near the start of the stage, and respawns the enemies fast. Since I hadn't played this game in so long, I refused to look at a guide and just tried to play the game as fresh as possible. This meant by the end of the game, I had to backtrack a lot, which I also didn't enjoy. I expected some backtracking, but I was shocked at how much I had to do because of the restricted item game. The routing is also a bit nonsensical. If you want this hard tank in Tunnel Rhino's level, you need to break this rock, and you do this by charging up Volt Catfish's weapon to shake it? What? I know it's causing an earthquake, but it's an electric weapon, that's so weird. Or how beating Blast Hornet depowers the bulky mech enemies and removes these crates from Gravity Beetle stage, allowing you to grab a heart tank. Why does beating him change any of that? I'm not very familiar with this game, so I'm not going to provide a best upgrades first, least backtracking guide this time around. It seems pretty hard in this game anyway, due to the restricted item game. But to give X3 its flowers, I really do like the final boss in this game. The first phase is this crazy game of dodging his fast attacks. And then his second phase, Kaiser Sigma, is insane because the armor blocks big charge shots from hitting him. So you need to be very precise in aiming your shots. The first phase of the charge shot, aka the Green Blast, is really good at hitting Sigma here. It's a very tough fight, but I really enjoyed it. This game came out in the last year of the Super Nintendo's lifespan, so the graphics are the best we've seen in this series yet, since developers really understood how to push the console to its limit. Backgrounds are more detailed than X2, and there's even more visual effects on screen, like the body armor shield. The soundtrack is unfortunately a downgrade in my opinion. It's still good, but not as memorable as the music from the previous games. I've never found myself re-listening to songs from this game, and now I remember why. Earlier I mentioned how the game was ported to the PlayStation 1, and this version was ported to the original X collection, so it's actually the first one I played. It's largely the same, except there's some animated cutscenes added. I guess that was a common feature of 16-bit ports to the PS1, because some of the Final Fantasy games also did this. To be honest, I wasn't having that much fun playing this game. When I beat a boss in the previous games, I felt a sense of accomplishment, but here was just relief that it was over. Even outside the difficulty, I don't like the level design much in this game. I feel like I spend way too much time fighting enemies compared to standard platforming, that it breaks the pace a little, because you're constantly slowing down to fight, and the stages just aren't very memorable or distinct from each other. The whole game just felt like I was going through the motions. I still did enjoy my playthrough, because I like Mega Man X, but this is easily the weakest game in the retrospective so far. X3 is a good platformer that suffers from a lot of underdeveloped ideas, bizarre choices, and unfair difficulty at times. I am aware there's an improvement hack called the Zero Project that fixes many of my complaints, like making Zero an actual playable character or improving the limited routing. But I was kind of tired of X3 after recording it, so I didn't play this version. From what I've heard, it absolutely sounds like the best way to play this game. It's a bit sad to end off the 16-bit era with the game I'm not crazy about, but the next game in the retrospective is Mega Man X4, which is a game I definitely like much more than X3 to say the least. See you guys soon.